present. For the purposes of quorum, Eddie, we will need a confirmation of how many members are here.
Chair, from the NA side, I've got Mr. Chabane, Mr. Joe McClover, yourself, Mr. Ross, Ms. Mulekwa. So we do have a quorum to start the meeting. So maybe the colleague from the NSOP, he can also confirm how many members are in there.
Thank you, Chairperson. From the NSOP side, we've got Ms. Bartlett, Ms. Snita, Ms. Sheikh, Mr. Zandamela, and Ms. Mekalka. So we do have a quorum to start the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Co-Chair, Shaida, Honorable.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning to the leadership of the Municipal Demarcation Board. And our meeting today is a joint meeting with the Select Committee that is responsible for issues of the Home Affairs. And our meeting today, it will start being a joint, and as we go forward, it will end up being a normal portfolio committee on Home Affairs of the National Assembly. So the agenda of the meeting, it is as circulated. I hope everyone has the agenda. So this meeting, to an extent that we'll be discussing issues that affect both National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. It will be co-chaired between myself and Honorable discussing issues that affect both National Assembly and the Chairperson. The National Council of Provinces will be co-chaired between myself, opening remarks, and Honorable hand over to her to affect both National Assembly and the Chairperson. The National Council of Provinces will make opening remarks between myself, opening remarks, and Honorable hand over to her to maybe the items and the Chairperson that make opening remarks to joint meeting, which is item number 3, items, and item number 4, respectively. Then I will take over after when we're done with these 2 items, joint meeting. So thank you very much. I think we are entering items and third term joint parliament under the agenda. I will take COVID-19 items. When we should reiterate this, thank you very much. What I've said, we commend the government, the executive under the COVID-19 and the management when Parliament under the individual unforeseen COVID, which is the first of its own kind for our when government the management leadership and the management has traversed under the individual unforeseen COVID, commanded we are just suggesting that remind all of us is that, you know, we are in a journey of construction. We're constructing what we call a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united and a prosperous country. And as a committee and as parliament, we have that responsibility on our shoulder. Or we're in the forefront of ensuring that we build this, or we get part of this construction of a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united and a prosperous South Africa. As Parliament, will have to execute or be part of this construction, not alone. We'll have to do that with other arms of state, judiciary, the executive, the media, and most importantly, the people of South Africa will have to get along with all of us in the construction of this kind of South Africa we want to see. I should say this, that in this committee, since we have started, we're a multi-party committee. But from time to time, I have experienced and seen even members of the opposition parties participating in ensuring that we construct this kind of South Africa our forebears have envisaged. I have not seen a lot of party politicking in the committee, but what I've seen is constructive and a collective decision making. Constructive. If it must be criticism, it gets to be constructive. At some point, I had to take an oversight together with Mr. Ross. And when we were in that oversight, I could feel and see that we were indeed part of this construction of the South Africa our forebears have envisaged. And we've got to take along South Africans, we've got to take along everyone in this construction. As we are all aware, it will not be a simple construction. Between 1912 and 1994, it took the ANC 86 years to fight for a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united, and a prosperous country. And between 1994 and now, it's about 26 years. That gives you a picture of the kind of efforts we need to put as Parliament, as the judiciary, as the executive, and as the people of this country. Most importantly, even the media. Because the media plays a very important role in ensuring that they convey the message to our people. They also hold Parliament into account on the issues that Parliament must be held into account on. So I think it's important for me to start the meeting in that note, because I've seen last week the media printed a print and television on saying, when I was a minister, I slept in a hotel for an amount of money that they've disclosed, which is blatantly not true, which was a lie. I was the only minister. When I was a minister, I continued to stay in a parliamentary village. I never went to where the executive stayed. But for some reason, the media decided to paint a picture that is wrong and untruthful to the people of this country. I don't know why, for what reason. And who will hold the media to account if they write and they publicize things that are blatantly not true? So I want to call on everyone, including the media, that we need to construct a South Africa that our forebears have envisaged. but it will be non-race, non-sex, democratic, united, and prosperous. And we need all of us.
Honorable Bongo.
Yes. Yes.
Honorable Chair.
Yes. You are recognized. Okay. Thank you. So I think it is important that I start on that note. Like I've said when I started, I'll give the co-chair because item 3, item 4 will be relating to the 2 committees of both houses. And I will hand over to Honorable Shahid to do opening remarks and proceed with item 2, 3, 4. I will come back on over dealing with the other items that are not joint in their nature. Honorable Shahid, over to you. Eddie? Eddie?
Aye, Chair?
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Oh, no, I was... Okay, I was busy on the call with a member, Mr. Muyelo.
I'm handing over to Honorable Shahid.
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies because I was kicked out of the system and I didn't even hear some of your opening remarks. But maybe just on your comments that you made with regard to COVID-19, let me not repeat what you've said. But I think I should just reiterate that we should commend the leadership in the Executive Council for managing this crisis in the manner that they did. Chair, I know, as you've indicated, that I should co-chair in terms of item 3 and item 4 on the agenda. My understanding is that item 3 relates to the integrated roadmap on amendments to the Electoral Act. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can confirm that. It's Adam Salmon here. I can confirm that.
No, thanks a lot. It's just my screen seems to be freezing. But be that as it may, I think item 3 on the agenda will be presented by Mr. Salmon. Adam, it's yourself. Perhaps we can just go into the presentation.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning, honorable members and all our guests. I'm going to start the presentation. Can I get a confirmation that it's seen by everybody?
Yes.
Okay, let me proceed. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So the Excel spreadsheet that I sent to everybody here contains 4 scenarios that
Sure.
all the stakeholders need to consider.
That Makua continues to beam himself here.
I beg your pardon, Chairperson?
That wasn't me. I'm not sure who's speaking, but can I ask all members to please mute your mic? Please continue.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so we have 4 possible scenarios that could possibly happen, that all the role players need to bear in mind. And so we have here the 4 possible types of bills that Parliament could pass if there are no constitutional amendments required. So should the bill imply that the constitution needs to be changed, all of these timelines will be pushed back somewhat later. And we probably wouldn't meet the Constitutional Court deadline of the 10th of June, 2022. So we've got the 4 scenarios here on the bottom, which are a constituency-related electoral bill, which is a 76 bill, an NCOP-led bill, and then a constituency electoral system with Section 75 bill, and then a non-constituency electoral system, which is 76, and a non-constituency system, which is 75. For all of these, we work our way backwards from the latest possible dates for the elections, as well as backwards from the Constitutional Court deadline. So if we go to the first of these, the Constituency 76 bill, we have 2 columns here indicating the latest possible election date, which is a Wednesday, 14 August, and the 22nd of May, 2024. So in the first of the 2 scenarios, these are the determining dates, because they actually push our deadline back further than the Constitutional Court date. So working our way backwards from this, we have the 6 phases, with the Electoral Commission coming first, and the Municipal demarcation, or the demarcation entity that will demarcate the boundaries. Then we have the regulations that need to be passed in terms of the Act to bring it into force. That will be done by the DHA. Then we have, before that, the President's assent, which also entails a period of time. And then going back from there, there's the NCOP process. And then going further up, there is the National Assembly, and then as well as the executive process. So I'll go into some detail in the first presentation, and the following ones are similar structure, but with slight variations based on the different scenarios. So what we have here then for the latest possible date is that the election date would need to be proclaimed on the 20th of May, to allow for the 86 days that the IEC usually require for electoral preparations. If the election date is the 24th of May, it will be the 26th of February that they need to prepare for, and going backwards like this. Just to remember here, this is in terms of the Constitution, there being a 90-day window after the rising of Parliament. So this is the earliest possible date that could be declared, and that's the latest. The IEC, this is the IEC schedule. So all of this entire timetable is being comprised of various consultations between Parliament, the executive, and the IEC for the last couple of weeks, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, whilst the electoral task team is busy preparing a draft legislation. So their schedule includes the voter registration weekend, 2 of them. The lengthiest process for the IEC would entail 6-month preparations. Once the municipal demarcation, or ward boundary demarcation entity had completed its work. So this will not necessarily be the MDB who's with us today, because their mandate doesn't include provincial and national boundaries, but it could well be them. But that would require amendments to their act. But irrespective of who does it, it will take, in IEC's estimation, around 18 months at least for them to prepare the demarcations of the various constituencies once the electoral system had been completed. And then subsequent to that, the IEC would need a further 6 months at least to adjust their voting district boundaries, constituencies, their operations and their systems and their training. So they said they needed at least 6 months, if not a year. So we've indicated the minimum period of time just because the timelines are tight. So the Constitutional Court deadline is indicated here, but as I said, this is later than what the IEC, later than what the IEC work that needs to be done. So moving our way backwards, we actually then go from there to the period of returning to Parliament. So sometimes the President returns a bill to Parliament to make further adjustments. In this scenario, there's no time allowed for that, which is not ideal, but in most cases, bills aren't returned to Parliament. But in other scenarios, we've allowed more time for this because this is the tightest possible timeline scenario. Also, in this scenario, we only give the President 2 weeks, which is again like a very low assumption. We're just trying to give the executive as much time to start the process, but we'll keep the presidency and all the role players informed as we go to make sure that they can start processing the bill as soon as time allows. And then the process going backwards from the NCOP, all the steps are indicated here, including estimated constituency periods, which actually make up the largest part of the timeline, just because Parliament isn't always sitting. So the process after both houses takes about 2 weeks. There's a mediation process that may need to happen if the NA and the NCOP can't agree. This haven't allowed for in this scenario because it doesn't often happen, and this is the tight scenario as indicated. The NCOP refers back to the NA once it's done. There's a consideration in the House. Again, all the dates are indicated here as the NCOP have guided us. So anyway, these are just basically all the steps that need to be processed. There's the biggest real consideration here is item 44 there, which is that the provincial legislatures need 2 months to go to all the provinces to consult, and so the consultation and submission process happens at the provinces. What has been indicated to us by the NCOP and the chairperson of the NCOP with us today, Honourable Sheikh, is that the process would also could potentially in these dates include a recess period for those provinces, but that negotiation could be done to make sure that falls in line with our schedule, or at least that they bear that in mind given the tight timelines. Also, what happens when it's sent to the provinces is that the NCOP at national level usually doesn't also call for comments and summary of submissions and public hearings subsequent to that, because that process is already covered in the provinces. So we haven't allowed time for those in this scenario, but it could potentially happen. Well, it has happened with bills that the NCOP then additionally consults or does public hearings in addition to the provinces. So then working our way backward, then we have the introduction of the bill, and the constituency period in this scenario for the NCOP falls within within the time that it's being referred to the provinces. So it doesn't impact on it's included in that period, which again may need to be consulted on. So what the chair Chairperson Sheikh also indicated, is that we need to keep the chairperson of the NCOP and the provincial speakers informed and involved in the process from as early on as possible, so that they in turn can plan their timelines accordingly. And then working backward to the National Assembly process, we have a constituency period more or less around this time. It's usually a month, and from June to July. And then there's the second reading, the adoption of the bill by the committee, draft amendments, deliberations by the committee, public hearings, collation of public comments. This collation of public comments occurs during the constituency period, so it's whilst the administrators are still working, even though the members are out in their constituencies. So there is an overlap there. As does the call for public comments, would also fall all over the Easter period. So that happens usually over a month of time, but it includes the Easter break. And then the introduction of the bill at the National Assembly in this scenario needs to happen the earliest possible, at the latest possible date, on the 17th of January next year. So that's also usually when Parliament is in recess, but we could introduce the bill at that period of time and then start a process actually being referred to the committee by 7th of February, which is usually the time of the year that we start processing bills. But working our way backward, these are the processes followed by the executive. We have the certification of the bill by the Office of the State Law Advisor. That needs to happen then, obviously, by the 17th of January. So each of these steps refer back to the previous steps. So if any of these scenarios change, we just need to change the days of time that it takes, and the concurrent date will automatically change in this timeline. Again, these are all the steps that the executive indicated to us. There's cabinet processes, there's a cabinet memo on the draft bill and also the initial bill. So there's two cabinet processes that need to be followed, each of which take a period of time. Again, this is subject to our informing the cabinet ahead of time that the bill needs to be processed. So this process is indicated as a week here, but it could take up to 12 days, which bearing in mind weekends. So depending on how long these periods take, you will see that if it takes 12 days, then the starting date will be the bill needs to be needs to be introduced by the 28th of August. But if it's only 7 days, then it could be introduced as late as the 2nd of September. You'll see the dates change as the days of inputted change. Then, okay, so there's a legal opinion by the Chief State Law Advisor, receipt and consideration of public comments on the draft bill, publication of the bill for comment, and then, as I indicated, the first cabinet process, consideration of inputs from the State Law Advisor by DHA, which they've indicated they can have an expedited process for. The preliminary State Law Advisor opinion, consultation with interested parties and government structures. So this is part of the executive process, but given the short timelines allowed for in this scenario, we've asked the executive if it would be possible to include a broader set of stakeholders, including political parties and the legislature, as part of this process, because members have indicated the desire for a symposium or a day workshop or conference on the electoral options and a discussion process. So there's a possibility of making this executive process overlap with that further consultative process that needs to happen from a political side, from the legislature side. So we could include broader stakeholders such as the PLOs, the party liaison officers of the IEC, and the political parties, and the houses of parliament. So there's a possibility of including that as part of that process towards the end of September. There also needs to be a socio-economic impact assessment, which takes some time. And so the drafting of the bill essentially needs to happen by from the 2nd of September to the 16th of September in this scenario. And that means that the latest that the executive can introduce the draft bill to us in this scenario, if they want to allow the IEC time, is the 2nd of September. So the electoral task team that is currently working on the draft bill have until basically the end of this month or the beginning of next month. And this is assuming that the election date happens on the latest possible date, which is the 14th of August on 2024. In this scenario, the earliest possible election date wouldn't even be possible, because we've already passed the date that the team would need to have introduced the draft or the draft policy options. So in this scenario, we would have to already start planning for a latest possible election date. So that's the first scenario. Then I'm going to go into the other scenarios more briefly. A similar process then followed by, for the Section 75 bill, there's just less steps during the NCOP process. However, given the constituency periods and the timing of these, the dates ended up in the calculation, ended up being similar or exactly the same for the Constituency 75 bill. So irrespective of what kind of bill it is, it's likely to follow the same amount of time, just because of when the constituency periods fall at Parliament. So again, these, for instance here, there's a constituency period usually from the end of March for about 3 weeks. But these dates vary, and so this is again subject to the programming committee at Parliament coming up with these dates. So these dates variables. So this is an estimation with the best possible information that we have at our disposal, but there are still a number of variables that are beyond our control. But again, as indicated, more or less a similar process with the 2nd of September 2020. In the scenario, we have allowed, however, a period of time in which the president could return the bill to Parliament, which was excluded in the first process. So if we take this unlikely scenario out, then it pushes the date on top later, as well as having allowed the president to a further period of time, a more realistic period of a month, to consider the bill rather than just the 2 weeks initially. Because this schedule is not as tight, we've allowed further time for possible such situations that although unlikely to happen, could still occur. So these are the additional times included in this scenario. Yes, so that's that period. And then moving on to a non-constituency bill. So in these two scenarios, there would be a far shorter process to be followed by the IEC and the demarcation process. So we'd use the similar constituencies. These two scenarios are less likely, just given the the general recommendations having been made for electoral with the Motlanthe high-level panel and the other escapes me now, but the recommendations were for improved accountability. So these scenarios could happen, but the general guidance has been by the experts has been towards a constituency system similar to what is happening at the local government election, but this remains to be seen. So in these scenarios, the timelines, because there's not a 18-month process of demarcation that needs to take place, and the IEC 6 months preparation, but the MD or the municipal or the demarcation process would take less, wouldn't have to be factored in. So in these scenarios, the 10 June Concord deadline has bearing. So it's from this period of time because the IEC process starts somewhat later. So in these scenarios, we work our way back from the 10th of June, and we end up with the dates of the latest introduction of the bill being October 2020, and similarly, so the earliest and latest election dates have no impact here. So the earliest and latest introduction are the same. So the 24th of October 2020. And again, in these scenarios, we're assuming 30 days with the president, and we've given more time, given should the president return it to Parliament for consideration. So yes, and we've given only 2 weeks for the department and IEC to amend the regulations. Should they have a running draft version of the regulations being amended as the bill is amended in the parliamentary process. So the timelines are tight, but there is precedent for that to happen quickly. And then the last scenario is the non-constituency 75 bill, and the timelines there are the 9th of October 2020. That said, these are the latest possible times. Parliament usually requires at least something closer to 10 months for the NA process and 6 months for the NCOP process. So although we have more time in the tightest possible scenario, it would be in the executive's favor, or the Concord's somewhat earlier than these dates. But we've just given the latest possible time. So those are the two scenarios. So that's the timeline as I've consulted with the various stakeholders, and I hand back over to the chairpersons for how we've processed further to engage with the content.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop presenting for now. Okay, let me keep the presentation up for now.
Yeah, no, as I was saying, thank you for the presentation. I'm getting a bit of echoing feedback, but I hope it's not affecting everybody. Thanks for explaining the different scenarios, and I'm sure members are now more familiar with the presentation as well as the different scenarios. But I think, as Adam has indicated, that this document has been worked on by both houses of Parliament, and there was consultation with the with officials in Home Affairs as well as the IEC. This is a working document, and clearly it highlights some of the timelines as well as the time constraints that we might encounter as we push ahead. with this process. Let me then open it up to members if you have any questions that you would like to ask, obviously bearing in mind that this is a working document. Honourable members, if you can give me an indication who would want to engage with the presentation. Okay, I see Honourable Roos. Is it Mr. Roos or Honourable Roos? My apologies. I see one hand has been raised. Are there any other members who would like to ask any questions? Please indicate. If you cannot raise your hand, please just give me an indication. Okay, let's.
Honorable Shaida.
Yes, Honorable Chabani.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got two people who would like to engage. Can we start with Honorable?
Okay, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I would just like to ask Adam, we spoke previously about other legislation that would also need to be amended. So legislation such as the Political Party Public Funding of Represented Political Parties Act, Judicial Service Commission and that. And we spoke in the committee about urgently understanding what those pieces of legislation are that will also be affected by the change required in the judgment. So if I can just get an indication, where are we in terms of getting input as a portfolio of acts that are affected? What are the other acts that we also need to look at when we consider the timeline? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Roos. Honorable Chabani.
No, thanks, Chairperson. Mine is also true that has been done so far. Just to raise two issues, I think, with Adams and the Minister. I think I understand, Chair, that it's a working document that it is assisting us to respond to the time frame that the Concord has directed us to do. Two, I think, is also on the area of the legislation, which I think the Minister may need to come in, and what are the areas which the Cabinet will be drafting in order to enhance the work that has processed. The last one, Chair, is on the just to check with the Minister in terms of the process that have started or in Cabinet in order to move towards drafting a bill and the time frame that has been given to Cabinet, so that we are able to work in line with what the Adams has indicated. The last one, Chair, to appreciate the IEC that has started conversation on this matter. And I think it's a good platform that it will enhance and mobilize society within the context of giving different views on how we must move forward as the Assembly. I think it's one area that is appreciated, and I think we must encourage that dialogue that is going to enhance our work. Those are my issues, Chairperson, for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chabani. I think what I'll do is first maybe request the Honorable Minister perhaps to respond to the Executive Council process, and perhaps you could even comment on the other areas of legislation to Adam. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was struggling to unmute myself. Honorable Sheikh, look, let me start with the issue of other legislation. The legislation that is on our desk, which is being presented to Cabinet, is the Electoral Act. Is the Electoral Act amendment. You remember the amendment to the 3 types of legislation, which finalized before the local government elections next year. That one we've already finalized. The IEC has finalized the bill. They've given it to us. It is going to be discussed in a cabinet cluster meeting on the 20th. I think the 20th is sometimes this week, yes. It's going to be discussed on the 20th. And then once it's passed there, the cabinet, and then it goes out to the public for public comment. That is the one I'm aware of the process requested by Honorable Chabani. Remember, it is the executive that must come with a policy that the amendment of the act will be based on. That is the draft we are still busy with in Home Affairs. And as soon as it's ready, I'm not sure at what time will it be ready. I'll go and check. And there's a mechanism in cabinet, which we have just used last week, whereby if we think something is very urgent, you write a motivation to the president to indicate to him what is the agency and what will happen if that agency is not followed. In that case, the president will put aside some of the normal processes that cabinet usually follows. With the Electoral Act amendment, that's exactly what I've done. The reason that is being presented on the 20th is because I wrote to the president and showed the agency, and I was told just yesterday that the president there said, so whatever, it's a pity that we are being given these dates just today. We'll need to sit down and study them very thoroughly. I was trying to look very carefully on the screen to follow them, but because there are small letters and there are so many of them, my mind is still a bit clouded. But and then see the areas where we can tell the cabinet to push aside some of the normal processes that they usually follow, because I think this is an emergency for everybody, and I think they will understand. Thank you very much.
Adam, do you want to add?
No, actually, most of the questions, the legislation asked by Honourable Ruiz, in our engagement with the executive, the administrators, or the legal administrators in the executive, they've indicated when the electoral amendments are introduced, it would need to be introduced with concurrent amendments to the subsequent legislation mentioned by Honourable Ruiz, so the Municipal Demarcation Act and the Party Political Funding Act and others. We actually introduce a body of concurrent amendments. Those are my games. Stand under correction, but this is what they indicated to us in our game. And then the other questions are answered.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Honorable Bongo, Chair, do you want to add anything else? Honorable Chair Bongo.
No. You can proceed. I'm fine.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Minister, for the responses. But I think I should also thank the team that put together this document. And I think, as has been said, that this is a working document. Minister, you've indicated that your department, the document and the timeframes, and perhaps co-chair that there should be a follow-up. And perhaps another issue as we further develop this working document would be the other pieces of legislation that would, so we can probably extend the document to also look into those aspects. I think with that said, thank you very much. We'll close then on this item. The next, Honourable Minister.
Yeah, there is something which I've just noticed very late. I'm really sorry. I'm apologizing. I can see there on the timetable put by Mr. Adam at the top right-hand corner, the scenario 1 electoral system include constituencies and section 76 bill. It says all scenarios assuming no need to amend the constitution. Am I correct, Mr. Adam?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can put it to you, Chairperson, that from the little we've studied, it's going to be impossible not to amend any part of the constitution if we have to bring this into consideration. There are quite a number of areas in the Constitution which needs to be amended. So the assumption that we can carry on all this without touching the Constitution, I think is next to impossible as far as I'm concerned.
Minister, for that addition. I think it's an important addition, and perhaps the team needs to then go back and rework on some of the documents. And I think in consultation with the two chairs, perhaps we'll bring it to the next meeting or to another joint committee where the matter can then be. Thank you very much all. I think we'll then move on to the next agenda item, which is the presentation by the Municipal Demarcation Board on preparations for local government elections 2021. Members would have also received that presentation. Honorable Minister, perhaps I can hand over to yourself in terms of dealing with that presentation. Thank you. Honorable Minister?
I didn't hear you, Chairperson.
You haven't heard me. Honorable Minister, we're moving on.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're moving on to the presentation by the Municipal Demarcation Board.
Yeah.
To lead with that presentation.
So sorry, Chairperson.
Sorry.
I don't understand, Chairperson.
Okay.
How I lead on the Municipal Demarcation Board, because it's a completely independent board. I've never.
Okay, no, thanks for that clarity. Then let me hand over to, I'm not sure who's doing that presentation. Chair. Yes.
I'm sure the Chairperson of the board, Mr. Manyoni, is here. I can see he's part of the delegation.
Okay.
Good morning.
Mr. Manyoni.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, the Minister. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting. My name is Mbali Mieni, the Deputy Chairperson of the Municipal Demarcation Board. I'd like to apologize for the Chairperson who is ill-disposed. I am here acting on his behalf. And in attendance is the CEO, Mr. Mutoto Sikiti. Chair, you will recall that we last appeared in the committee on the 12th of November 2019, where we presented a plan on the process that we will undertake and have undertaken leading towards the handing over of wards to IEC in August 2020. Whereas you have indicated, Chair, in your opening remarks, due to the unplanned circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, our processes were disturbed. It was we had to employ other contingency measures to continue with our work. The presentation today, honorable members, Chairperson, it seeks to share with the committee the status of the ward delimitation process. The CEO will take the committee through the presentation, and he will talk to a number of activities that I believe the honorable members have the vision, or the vision that the honorable members have will have the new information because it our presentation. However, you will be given an updated copy of the presentation, members. I would like our CEO to take us through the presentation, and we will take questions at the end of his presentation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Acting Chair and co-chairs of Portfolio and Select Committee, honorable members, Minister of Home Affairs. I'm going to take you through the presentation as the Acting Chair has indicated that when we submitted the presentation some weeks ago, yesterday we were in the technical IMC where the presentation was updated, felt that the information that we presented to the technical IMC should also be made available to the members, and therefore we shared that particular portfolio committee secretary. Chair, I'll go straight to the presentation outline. I'll focus on the mandate and the broader ward delimitation process, the engagement that we have had with critical stakeholders, and just share with the committee the principles guiding ward configuration and the ward delimitation criteria and application of them. And after sharing with the committee those issues, I'll then get into the status of the ward delimitation process, indicate how we had changed the broad plan after consultation with the Minister of COCTA and the IEC. And I will again emphasize some of the challenges that are still prevailing as and when we are dealing with the processes. And then I will conclude. Broadly, our mandate, we have got 4 mandate areas. The determination of municipal outer boundaries, the delimitation of municipal ward boundaries, the assessment of capacity of municipalities to perform their functions, and also render advisory services to stakeholders based on our mandate issues. Just to indicate, Chairperson, that the board took a decision that we are not going to do outer boundary determination. We need to focus on the inner boundary determination, which is the municipal relations. And the previous speaker, Mr. Salmon, indicating that there are matters that are not necessarily within the ambit of provincial boundaries. I can confirm that indeed in the demarcation bill that the minister published in the closing date, which was the 29th of July, there is a chapter where the board has to also be involved in provincial boundaries. Next slide. Next slide, please. That is just giving us a broader process of how it happens with the ward delimitation process. Normally, we'll start with the completion of the outer boundary process and hand over to the IEC. What we did in 2018, outer boundary adjustments, and the IEC in the second block then produce a voters roll. After that voters roll, certified voters roll, then the minister will determine and publish the formula for the titulars, after which the MEC and deviate where required. And after the MEC has done that, you will remember on the 12th of November, portfolio committee, how the board came in with the draft wards based on the number of wards that we had determined and the norms that we had in the country. Now, broadly, we want to complete the delimitation of wards this year, after which we will hand over to the IEC to prepare things. Next. This slide is just a repetition of the second block in the first place. If you could go to the next slide. Now, in terms of engagement with the critical stakeholders, we have engaged with the portfolio committee of COCTA last year and also this year around April. We have engaged various Munimecs in various provinces. We have engaged with the National House of Traditional Leaders, as well as provincial houses of traditional leaders, governance structures of SALGA. We have also engaged with the IEC party license structures at a national and provincial level. We have also engaged by invitation with the NCOP visits in Limpopo and Northern Cape. We have conducted some awareness and education campaigns in a number of municipalities. We have also engaged specifically with some communities that invited us and some political parties that invited us. After the wars, after engaging with all the technical people in the municipalities, that was the draft that we did in November. We engaged the portfolio committee on the 12th of November, as the acting chair has indicated. Also done a public consultation with the Eastern Cape, Gauteng, KZN, Mpumalanga, and Western Cape, just to qualify that in Gauteng we did those engagement in Ekurhuleni, and I'll talk more on those. In relation to the municipalities that you will see there, I said we had virtual meetings with the local municipalities in batch 2. I will elaborate more. Just to remind the committee, the next slide, please. To remind the committee, more so because it was not a joint meeting on the 12th, on the principles guiding ward configuration. Next slide, please. The principles that we use when we do ward configuration, we use the voting districts as building blocks for the creation of wards to ensure that we, as far as possible, try to bring in the exact the IEC has. And we try as far as possible not to split these voting districts. And wards are always created in a manner that everybody can identify that this is a ward. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the criteria for the delimitation of wards primarily, and I think this is where I got a lot of questions on the 12th of November. We use the primary criteria as the norm, and the norm is the average number of registered voters in each ward of each municipality. Now, the norm, we are allowed a deviation of 15% above and below. I will illustrate a little bit later. And this is where a number of submissions and objections fall short, and because if they are not necessarily within the norm of that particular municipality, then it becomes very impossible for the board to consider that as a legal ward. We also look at the need to avoid, as far as possible, the fragmentation of communities. And I think I emphasized that we are saying as far as possible, because sometimes it is not possible not to fragment a particular community because the norm will be indicating that way. We say the object of this process is to enhance participatory democracy and also to allow for constituency-based kind of democracy. You have heard the previous presentation where we were hearing about the outcome of the Concord judgment. At a local government level, anybody can be an independent ward councillor, except they might not necessarily have to participate in the proportional representation. The availability and location of the suitable place or places for voting, this is why we have to be easy, because every voting station that the IEC has must be having a communication facilities or infrastructure and accessibility. We look at the density of the population, the topography and the physical characteristics of the area, and the number that are entitled to vote within the required time frame. And as I said earlier, the ward must be identifiable. Next slide is just what I said, how do we really determine the norm? And as indicated earlier, the norm is the average number of registered voters in a municipality divided by the number of wards in the municipality. Now, you'll remember in November was detailed showing you that in each and every municipality, you have a different norm. So this is just an example that I showed how we had determined the norm, the minimum and the maximum for all the municipalities in the country before we started with the configuration of the draft wards. So this example is just showing a municipality, an imaginary municipality that has got 20,000 registered voters and the number of wards being 20, then the norm is going to be 1,000, which therefore means that the 15% below the norm, which is the variation that is allowed, is 850, and 15% above the norm is 1,150, which means therefore that a ward that is having 850 to 1,150, anything between there, the number of those registered voters will become a legal ward. If a ward is having 849 or 1,151, that ward is not legal. So these are some of the mathematical issues that I've been engaged on. I remember some members of the committee indicating that, is it a numbers game? And the answer was a simple yes, it is. Next slide, please. Now, the status as of now, I can just indicate that we did a technical consultation with municipal officials in August up to September last year. And after that, we prepared the draft wards. What is important here is that the draft wards that we drafted with the technical municipal officials have no legal status. So nobody can go and say, I'm taking the board on a litigation because of this particular was, because these were just meant for public, at least when we engage communities, we are engaging them with a draft at hand. And we planned and began the public consultation processes from February 2020, and we were supposed to have completed them on the 30th of April. At that time, when I presented the program, we were to hand over the official wards to the IEC by August 2020. Normally, we between ourselves and the IEC, we say on average, we should hand over the wards between 6 and 10 months before the election, so that the IEC can.
You see, it's supposed to be in a meeting, as you know, that we meeting these days.
Chairperson, should I continue? Okay. So that the IEC can be able to check if there are certain voting districts that might have been moved to other wards and be able to reconfigure them correctly, and as and when they do the public consultation processes, they are indicating to communities that this voting district has moved to a different wards. Now, as you know, that there was the issue of COVID, we had to reconfigure the program and revise the program, and the new date for the handover of the final delimited wards will be November 2020. Now, before I move to the next slide, I just want to indicate that when the state of disaster was declared, out of the 213 municipalities, the board had already consulted 109 municipalities on a face-to-face basis. And meetings in the 104 remaining municipalities were discontinued. And the majority of municipalities that were consulted were in Eastern Cape, except for 3, KwaZulu-Natal, except for 7, Mpumalanga, all of them, Western Cape, all except for 1, and Gauteng, we had only consulted with 1. Now, when we reviewed the program on the ward delimitation to allow other processes to be completed, especially the outstanding public consultation in the 104 municipalities that I've referred to, the board then decided to divide the municipalities into municipalities that are batch 1 and municipalities that are batch 2. That was for practical purposes to say those municipalities where public meetings were completed, we must refer them as batch 1 municipalities. And those were the municipalities in the provinces that I've mentioned earlier. Batch 2 were municipalities where public meetings were cancelled, and due to the cancellation of the consultation process, we then decided as the MDB that we'll arrange virtual meetings with the remaining 104 municipalities. Most municipalities responded positively to our request, and meetings were mainly attended by councillors, municipal officials, and in some municipalities, they invited even the ward committees. Next slide. Now, as we were closing as we were doing the batch 1 and the batch 2 municipalities, we then decided that for the comments and inputs, will require that municipalities that were in batch 1, we close the date for submission as the 31st of May. We put the date for submission as the 31st of May. And when we put the date as the 31st of May, we then received 518 submissions. We analyzed those submissions and presented them to the board for consideration. Now, in the analysis of those submissions, what we do, we use the very methodology that I referred to earlier, the criteria, to say this submission from this individual does not really adhere to the criteria that we have put forward, and therefore we reject this submission. And I can confirm, Chair, that there were a number of submissions that were rejected, but there were also the majority of them were accepted. Now, on the 22nd of July, the board set to all the submissions that were made for the 109 municipalities to publish that for objections. I just need to emphasize that all these things were still having no legal basis. The publication for objection is the start for the legal process. And the reason why we did this earlier from last year for consultation process purposes we understood that in terms of the legislation, you are only given 14 days to object. And therefore, we decided that let's have all these other processes and was configured with no legal basis. And this is the result thereof. Now, for those 5 provinces, the publication of gazettes were done. The Western Cape, the gazette was done on the 29th of July for objections. The objections closed around the 11th of August. KwaZulu-Natal was published on the 6th of August. Mpumalanga was published on the 7th of August. Eastern Cape, when we were drafting the presentation, like we said earlier, the government printing works had said that the Eastern Cape will be the 10th of August, but they then informed us that they are publishing earlier on the 3rd of August, which meant that it was published earlier on the 3rd of August. Gauteng, the only one municipality was dealt with in Gauteng, and that was Ekurhuleni. Next slide, please. Next slide. No, a little bit, go back a little bit. Okay, now we then decided on the issue of the batch 2 municipalities. Just to refresh your memory, batch 2 municipalities were for those provinces that I had not mentioned in the earlier slides. It was 3 municipalities in Eastern Cape, all the municipalities in Free State, 8 municipalities in Gauteng, except for Ekurhuleni, KZN 7 outstanding municipalities, Limpopo, all the 22, Northwest, all the 18, Northern Cape, all the 26, and Western Cape, the 1 that was outstanding. So for those municipalities, we then said the closing date for submissions is the 31st of July. And I can indicate, chairs, that we have not done the analysis yet, but we now know the number of submissions that came from the municipalities that were in batch 2, which were the municipalities that were consulted virtually. The number thereof is 958 submissions that we have received. We are now consolidating. We are doing 2 things at the same time. We are processing, we'll be busy processing objections for batch 1 and processing submissions for batch 2, which will be served in the board that will be sitting on the 22nd of September. And then we are planning that for batch 2 municipalities, the Gazette will be published somewhere around the 29th of September and the 7th of October. We will hand over to the IEC for batch 1 around September. Now, this is just a revised plan in terms of the timelines. I've indicated that the 22nd of July, the board approved the publications for objection for the batch 1 municipalities. And that publication for objections was from the 29th of July to the 12th of August. And the closing date of for objections is the 12th to the 26th of August. So currently we are busy with that particular process for batch 1. And then we have a committee comprised of provincial representatives of the provincial house, Cocta provinces, member of a board in a province, Salga. Those are the committees that will be looking at what is it that is coming from the objections. They will be meeting on the 31st of August for batch 1. And then those are some of the internal committees of the board that considers the submissions before and recommend to the board for approval on the 22nd of September. And then the final publication will be done between the 25th and the 30th of September. And then on the 30th of September, we'll then hand over to the IEC. Next slide, please. With regard to the batch 2 municipalities, I've already mentioned the 31st of July as the closing date for submissions, and then we have an internal committee of the board that will consider those submissions, and then the board will be sitting on the 22nd to look at whatever submissions have been made and then publicize for objections from the first week of October. And then the closing date for objections will be that that week of October, the second week to the third week of October. Now, the ward delimitation committee is the repetition of the other one, but we have to repeat the same actions for batch 2. Now, you will see that in that slide, we talk about handing over the data to the IEC on the 23rd of November. We are saying immediately after the board would have said and considered and approved the final publication, that data will be handed over to the IEC on the 23rd of November. And then the final publication in terms of our program with the government printing works will be on the 25th to the 30th of November. Now, obviously, next slide, Chairperson. Chairperson, we shared this slide in terms of challenges that we have been coming across when we were engaging with the communities, engaging with the councillors and the political parties. One of the challenges, the lack of understanding of the word delimitation or demarcation processes generally. And this has been witnessed at all levels, because in certain instances, communities or parties will say to us, increase the number of councillors or increase the number of wards. They did not understand that this is the forte of the MEC after considering the formula that is determined by the minister. The other challenge that we have experienced is that the increasing number of wards and changing ward boundaries, sometimes it disrupts municipal planning, because some municipalities will have in their service delivery and budget implementation plan or IDPs, having planned a particular project in a particular ward. And some people feel that if the ward is reconfigured, then that ward is not going, or that space is no longer going to benefit for a particular project. And our view was that the delimitation of ward boundaries cannot change the space where a community hall is going to be built. The space remains the same space. It's a question of understanding within the context of the broader municipality. Now, some concerns that communities continue to raise is communities feel they need to be left in the same and familiar wards. And sometimes there was split communities that consider themselves as one, especially in traditional council areas. Some people still say the use of registered voters instead of population is a disadvantage. But that we still have to see how it become a disadvantage. And sometimes, due to the large size of some settlement, it's not always possible to contain them or to delimit them into a single ward. The example below is an indication where you have a Hillbrow suburb that is split over more than 5 wards. You can see the arrow there on the color that is brownish. I'm colorblind, but it's just showing that that area that is brownish is Hillbrow, and it is split into 5 wards because we were looking at the norm of that particular area. Next slide, please. Next slide. In some instances, the sizes of wards vary in spatial size and extent due to the density of voters, and this might mean that some councillors would have to travel long distances than others to service their constituencies. This is more prominent in the Northern Cape, where you'll find that one councillor is traversing more than 100 kilometers because the norm determines that. And areas with low density have bigger wards, and the opposite is always the case. I think the example underneath will show you an area in Buffalo City. If you look at where the 2 arrows are showing, Ward 2 and Ward 4, you will see that Ward 2 is very small in cross-sectional area, but that ward councillor will be serving almost the same average number of councillors with the person in Ward 4. But the person in Ward 4 is having a very vast area to cover. Now, in conclusion, Chair, we are saying the COVID-19 has impacted on our initial program, as alluded to above, and that necessitated the board to review the program. We consulted, as we should, with the IEC and reviewed the program, and as the MDB will be able to meet the agreed timeframes in handing over the wards to the IEC by November. And we continue to encourage everyone to engage with the current ward delimitation processes, especially now that we are getting into the legal part, which is more objections that are formal. And we still emphasize that for those who are objecting, they need to look at the criteria, and for every objection they make, they should be able to start by saying, yes, this is the norm. We are within the norm in terms of average number of registered voters in a vote. Chair, the MDB looks forward to the continued guidance from the committee. And we are saying in conclusion that currently for batch 1 municipalities, we are busy processing objections for the 5 provinces that I mentioned. And for batch 2, we are processing submissions and will be publicizing for objection after the board meeting of the 22nd of September. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mutoto and Ms. Miyeni for that presentation on the ward delimitation process as well. Honourable members? All members, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
We don't.
Hello?
Yeah, we hear you now, Chair. We were
can
lost for a while.
Okay. No, thank you. Sorry, man. I think I'm having some signal issues, but I suspect my gadget has a problem itself. I was just thanking them for the presentation, but I wanted an indication from honourable members if they have any questions of clarity or they would want to engage the presentation. Can you please give me an indication?
Yes, Mgcini Chwaku.
I'm sorry, can I get your name again, please?
It's Member Chwaku.
Chago. Member Chago, Honourable Chago. Any other member?
Mtetwa.
Mtetwa. Okay, if there aren't any other members, can we start with Honourable Chago?
Okay, no, thank you very much. Okay.
Yes, who's speaking?
I'm struggling with my pet. I just want I also have a question, but I'm struggling here. Yes.
Okay, I've got 3 honourable members. Honourable Chago.
Okay, can I start, Chair?
Please do.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I just have a couple of questions very quickly. Just wanted to check with the Demarcation Board if there are any, wanted to check with the Demarcation Board if there are any added municipalities. If there's, how many wards have they added now, the increase of the wards from what number to what number? Is there any increase in the voting stations from what number to what number? The progress on the Vuwani, are they going to experience any problems for Vuwani? Has the matter for Vuwani been, sorted out, the demarcation there? The Matatiela demarcation, are there any problems there? Are they going to experience any actual issues there? I hope I'm not too fast, Chairperson. I hope I'm not too fast. Okay, there are submissions that have been made on my side. I actually got them from the members of the community. There was a highlight, maybe the Demarcation Board must have a look at. I think it's the spelling of the majority of the voting stations in Mpumalanga. So I think we made that submission. I thought maybe that was actually the highlight. They said there's a lot of spelling errors in the in the voting station names of the Mpumalanga. I think of the whole Mpumalanga. They just have to review them and make sure that they are fine. I wanted to check with the Demarcation Board. Are there any voting stations which fall on the farms? Maybe there are, or on someone's private real estate. We experienced quite a lot of that when we're doing the campaigns in Mpumalanga, in those farms of Mpumalanga and also the Western Cape. And you find that a farmer there doesn't want to let people to go in and do the campaigning. That was the experience we got. And sometimes some of these voting stations are in someone's real estate. Then you cannot campaign or enter there. So can they maybe appraise us in terms of the number of those voting stations, and have they alerted the owners of those real estate or the farms that we are going to do campaigning there, and they must open their private real estate, because there are people who are, especially farm workers, who are working in those farms, and we need to have access to them so that we're able to do the work. So how many voting stations that are actually falling on the farm on someone's private real estate? My last one, Chairperson, on the, I wanted to check, man, would have liked to have a public participation done, so, but they are doing on a virtual platform, but are they sure, 100% sure that they are actually reaching those who don't have data, the poor, our people in the rural areas, in the villages? Is the demarcation board maybe aware, done everything possible in this COVID-19 period to reach to those who are in the villages who might not have access to the electronic, platforms and all of that? Some of them, they can't even know how to use, the virtual, meetings and actually all of that. And in their meetings, did they invite councillors alone? They said some of the ward committees that they were participating in that meeting. Did they invite also the, what kind of councillors? Did they invited PR councillors or ward councillors? Who were the people who were actually participating in those virtual, platforms? Did they invite the MMM, these MLCs, this, municipal liaison officers, these MLOs? Did they invite them as well? So how sure are they, Chairperson, that they've reached the people on the ground so that they can put their objections there as well? No. And then I think the last one that maybe we must also add as the challenge is Chairperson with the demarcation board when they are doing this consultation. Some other people on the ground, the communities, they think that some of those wards, the way that they are demarcated, they are done on political reasons. You'll find that a certain political party which is governing in that province or in that municipality, they found that in the ward, they no longer enjoy a support. And this demarcation it actually does not make sense. You find that, but it does not make sense. But the person is running away from the constituency where he's having a problem. Now he's trying to run away and demarcate it. And then that actually causes instability and all of that. Did they actually have those kind of objections came in? People saying that, but why are you actually cutting us out? Because there is not a problem here, that the problem is that you are not popular because you are not trying, to deliver on something like that. Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. Those are my
Honorable Tsaku. I think the questions, I'm sure the Municipal Demarcation Board has noted the relevant questions that relate to their mandate. Honorable Mtetwa.
Thanks, Chair. Mine, Chair, is just a question in terms of the formation of the ward as to which studies the MDB that they are using, because I still believe that some of the ward, there are a number of people that are there which at the end of the day also require services that don't go for registration, that are not registered. So which studies are they using? Is it State SA, or sometimes they do go there physically and check this word before final demarcation? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mtetwa. Honorable Bartlett. Honorable
Chair,
Bartlett.
I'm covered. Yes, Chair. Thank you very much and good morning. I'm covered by the previous speakers, but I only want on slide 10 the issue or a clarity on the issue of the numbers of the ward delimitation, especially. I think the speaker spoke about the 850 and also the 1,150 members. So I just want clarity on that one. The others covered me already. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Bartlett. I'll hand over then to the Municipal Demarcation Board to respond.
I raise my Chair. It's Lekwase.
Oh, Honorable Lekwase. Is that okay? Honorable Lekwase, is there any other honorable member? Okay, Honorable Lekwase, please continue.
Yes, Chair. Mine is, I only want to know from the demarcation board, how have they strengthened their public participation, especially in affected areas? And then my other question is, does the board have dispute resolution mechanism to address this community dissatisfaction that might arise from the demarcation process? My last question will be, to what extent does the board take community representation into account in determining these municipal boundaries? For example, you have community leaders in Ventersdorp and in Tlokwe from the Northwest that have forever been complaining about the amalgamation of both municipalities into one JB Max. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Legwasi. I think if there's no other honorable member, let me then hand over to the Municipal Demarcation Board. Is it Mr. Mtoto?
Chair, I will just respond on one or two issues, and then the CEO will come in. The question from Honorable Chwako with reference to the virtual meetings that we held, as a contingency plan or a reviewed plan from our original plan due to the COVID-19 pandemic that came about. We are aware, we consider that as the board, we are aware that we have communities that might not have access, to these platforms to listen to our presentations virtually. Hence, as a result, we undertook to go to social media platforms to publicize and also to use community radio stations to do our presentations on the actual processes that we have undertaken. Why community radio stations? We believe that in the rural areas, communities can be, listen to what we will be presenting. So that is what we did. But we also went through electronic media, television to also present our plan. Yes, we took that into cognizance, and we had to make sure we use all media platforms that are out there to make sure we reach out to everyone that is interested and affected by the processes. Maybe CEO can then take other questions that came. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Acting Chair, and thank you to the Honorable Chair. Let me start with Honorable Tsaku. Your first question is the issue around the number of wards. In 2016, the number of wards that came out of the formula by the minister and the MECs were 4,392. For 2021, there has been an increase in the number of wards to 4,468. And I must indicate, Honorable Tsaku, that this is more the issue between the minister and the MEC, because the MEC, in terms of legislation, can deviate by 10% if a municipality is having more than 30 councillors, and can deviate by 2 or 3 if the municipality has more than 10 councillors. And if a municipality has 7 councillors, then if you are deviating, you can only deviate upwards. You cannot deviate downwards. So this is the result of the processes that I talked about after the MECs. For the MDBs, just to then place these numbers in a space called a ward, and then you determine the boundaries. You raised a question around the voting stations on farms and whether there is an increase in the voting station. That is in the total arena of the IEC, which is the reason why we hand over the wards earlier, 6 to 10 months, so that in places where there was no voting station, then the IEC can create a voting station. So that is not necessary in our space. You raised the question of Vuani. Vuani was a matter of an outer boundary process. Incidentally, I stay in Vuani. At the moment, the situation there is quiet. And it's only that I didn't share the specifics in the presentation that Eddie will share with the members later. You will find that generally the submissions that came from Limpopo were around were more than the submissions in all the other provinces percentage-wise. Now, we are not so sure. When we were presenting yesterday to the IMC on election, where we are meeting with the security cluster as well, they had also not area of concern, but immediately when the whole issue of the objection is finalized, we'll be able to share with the security cluster those areas where we have received objections and which objections might not have been considered in the affirmative, so that they then start focusing on those areas, whether there is anything that is emerging from those particular areas. Matatiele, I can indicate that Matatiele is not an MDB matter, it's a provincial boundary matter. And that matter is being handled by the Department of COCTA and Justice and Constitutional Development. I know that they were supposed to deal with the issue of submission for a constitutional amendment, because for you to be able to change a boundary, you need an amendment in the Constitution. And I think the processes, Honorable Tsaku, are delicate in that the two provinces must agree, provincial legislatures must agree that indeed the area need to move to a particular province. I think the other one, the acting chair has dealt with it in terms of the other people. And then the last one, where you're talking about political party consideration and all these matters. Look, the processes of the MDB allows everybody to make a submission. An individual can make a submission within the criteria. A political party can make a submission within a criteria. But if that submission is outside the criteria, the board will shoot it out. So it doesn't matter whether it's a political party. It's just a question of perceptions, because in every space there is a political party, and some people feel that when this word has not been configured in their own way, it will have a negative impact on their councillorship in the future, and in some instances this may lead to unintended consequences. Now, the issue of objections, like I said in the presentation, that for batch 1 municipalities, we have just published for objections. So we are receiving objections. We have not yet processed the objections. We will be able to understand the nature of the objections, whether they align to the nature of submissions that we received. Remember I said we received 518 submissions in the batch 1 municipalities. So if the objections are going to come, we'll be analyzing whether is the objections based on those that we have rejected, the 206 that we have rejected, or is the new objections that are coming, because this is now a legal process. And we are communicating with every individual that has made a submission to say, your input has not been taken because you failed to deal with the issue of the norm. Your submission is above the norm of the municipality, or your submission is splitting 5 voting districts and all those kind of things. So that's the issue there. Honorable Mtetwa, you talking about the formation of wards, which study are we using? And whether we have fiscal verification. Firstly, I just need to indicate that we don't use a study. Our principal document is the voting, the voters' roll, that is the one that is given by the IEC, and I indicated that they had given a voters' roll, a national common voters' roll in March 2019. And what I was mentioning as a challenge, because some people feel that when you use the registered voters or the average number of registered voters in the ward, it does not necessarily say that me as a councillor in that ward will be saving the number of voters that are registered, because there are other people that might not necessarily be in the voters' roll. Beside the people in the voters' roll, there might be other people who do not qualify to vote, who are underage, who might not be necessarily there. And that information is with State South Africa. So that is still a policy debate. We have discussed with the IEC and say practically to start talking about population, it might be a difficult exercise. The issue around physical verification, the MDB has a very limited number of staff. We can't do physical verification in all the places. I think when I presented in November, I indicated that we had proposed we could have 2 or 3 staff members working in a province who understand the dynamics of the province and do an analysis in terms of all the submissions that we are receiving, but that could not be approved because of budgetary constraints that government is facing. So our fiscal verification, that is why when we started the drafting, we went to the municipalities themselves and say, you guys who are in the planning environment, you understand your area better. Let's sit together, we draft those particular words for public consultation. Some of the inputs that come indicate that they show to us that, look, here, for you to get the number, you must go over the mountain and on the other side of the river. So those are some of the things that we get out of the engagement process. Honorable Bartlett, you talked about slide 10. I wasn't so sure what you were referring to, because slide 10 was just an example of how we determine the norm of a ward. It is not, it's an imaginary example, because if I use a normal example, you'll find that it will have numbers that may not necessarily be easy to understand. So there I was just indicating that for us to determine the norm, we look at the registered voters in that municipality and divide by the number of wards that have been determined by the MEC in that municipality to get the norm. But we are allowed a variation of 15%, which means that if you look at that municipality, imaginary one in slide 10, which has got 20,000 registered voters and 20 wards, the norm will be 1,000. But if you have to go down so that you don't cut certain places by streets, you will go down by 150. And if you go up by 150, which therefore mean that in that municipality, that is in the example, for one who is making submissions and want to be sure that is within the norm, he must make it a point that the numbers that he's having are between 850 and 1,150. That's what I was indicating. Honorable Lekwase, you talked about public participation in affected areas. I'm not so sure which affected areas, but I want to believe that you are referring to the area around Tlokwe, Ventersdorp, that is in the new municipality. Look, the Tlokwe Ventersdorp issue is an issue of the outer boundary determination. And if I remember correctly, we received from Ventersdorp a sort of very outrageous kind of, it was not a request because it went straight, it was directed to the President, the Minister of COCTA, and the MDB to say they are claiming something like 16 billion rand. But it was not clear what the 16 billion rand was all about. But what we have said, even in places like Vuani, we have said that, look, the board will only deal with the outer boundary determination after the 2021 local government elections. And anybody who is submitting can submit. And as I speak to you, we do have submissions in that regard that are close to around 30 now. And the people in Ventersdorp might be in that list. But in terms of how we have engaged with the municipality, the new municipality there, I think our communication has engaged that municipality more than any other municipality in the country during the ward delimitation process. The last one, I think, was 2 weeks ago, when our communications person went there to make a presentation. It was the second or third presentation that was made there. So Chair, I think those were the questions, and if I've left out something, maybe the acting chair can add where I might have left off.
Acting Chair.
No, he has covered all the questions.
Yeah, I thought he had. Thank you for the presentation and the responses. I think I'm going to hand over then to Honorable Bongo to close on this item. Honorable Bongo, and then because you're going to be continuing with the rest of the meeting.
No, thank you
Honorable
very
Bongo.
much. Thank you very much, Honorable Shaida. And thank you very much to the Municipal Demarcation Board and the other presentations that we've got. I think the presentation tried to bring about an alignment on the kind of work that we need to engage in, particularly the IEC and the implementation of the Constitutional Court judgment. I think I need to say this, that the Portfolio Committee and the Select Committee and Parliament at large is committed in ensuring that we comply with what the court has given us, the 24 months deadline. But Honorable Ross raised one critical point, that what about other pieces of legislation? Because we've got to feature them in this process, in the process. And we'll look into that. I think in the next meeting we'll factor those kind of things. This part of the presentation, I think, ends the joint meeting. From now onwards, we'll proceed with the Portfolio Committee meeting of the National Assembly. And thank you very much from the Municipal Demarcation Board and the chair of IEC and others, because the presentations that were done were meant for the joint and all of us. And at this point, we are done with the joint meeting. We are now proceeding with the Portfolio Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Those who want to remain, they can remain for the purposes of information and so on, but all others, except the minister, the deputy minister, they must remain. And then thank you very much. We're taking item number 7 and item number 8. We're going to take these items, both presentations, so that we deal with the the issue relating to time. Then we would ask item number 7 is a briefing on the issues around procurement of these PPEs. We're all aware that the country was plunged into some controversy around this appointment. So we've been requested that all departments must report to this, because we want to determine what was the process followed. Was it in line with the legislation or not? Who are these people who were appointed? Do they have companies or not? Are they friends, family, or pals? We need to determine that so that we enhance the issue of accountability. I'm handing over to you, Minister, to do the two presentations so that we members can hold the department into proper account on this matter. Over to you, Minister. Can you unmute yourself? Dr.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
Oh, thank you very much. I was speaking in the vacuum. Thank you, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Advocate Bongo, and members, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. Indeed, we have got a presentation here about the processes followed, but we thought the most important part of this presentation is the attached document laying out some of the questions that Advocate Bongo was asking just now about which companies got where, in what way, etc., etc. We are handing it over to you. Remember that also we are going to hand over, Chairperson, the same document to the Cabinet Committee announced by the President, headed by the Minister of Justice, Minister Lamola, whereby they are going to take this spreadsheet, check all the companies, who formed the company, how old was it when it was given the tender, what process were followed, and all that. So there are going to be two processes. One given to you, you can do the same thing, and the other going to be given to the committee. But for the presentation, I will ask the acting DG, Mr. McKay, to take you through the presentation, and I'll be able to take the questions. I'm sure the CFO is also on board to answer some of the questions. Mr. McKay, please.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister, I'm going to share the presentation now. The CFO will talk through the presentation. I hope the presentation can be seen.
Yes, we can see it. Go on.
Thank you.
I'm audible. Honourable Chairperson, Ministers, Deputy Minister, and members of the committee, good morning. My name is Gordon Hollenby. I'm the CFO at Home Affairs. Chairperson, it's a short presentation. If you allow me, I'll start the presentation. The purpose of the presentation is to provide a report on the process that was followed in the procurement of personal protective equipment for COVID-19. Chair, our report goes a little bit wider than just the procurement of personal protective equipment, also includes some services, the cleaning services in particular. Chairperson, I think the background is well known by now. It feels like yesterday, but on the 15th of March 2020, the President announced the declaration of a national state of disaster following the declaration by the World Health Organization of the COVID-19 as a pandemic. On the 18th of March, regulations under the Disaster Management Act were published regarding steps to prevent an escalation of a disaster. The DPSA issued Circular 7 of 2020 that inter alia required of departments to procure sufficient hand sanitizers, soap, gloves, masks, tissues, and when possible, temperature scanners to use for use to monitor the possible exposure of employees to COVID-19. The DHA EXCO approved a standardized procurement process for COVID-19 on the 7th of April. Chairperson, we also presented the standardized procurement approach for COVID-19, the budget allocation, and the expenditure to the Portfolio Committee on the 28th of April. This is the second time we present in relation to COVID-19 on process, budget, and expenditure. Chairperson, we initially approved a budget of 22 million, and this was subsequently increased to 39 million rands. Chairperson, this slide just gives an indication of the standardized procurement approach adopted by EXCO, the DHA EXCO, on the 7th of April. At that stage, we were buying N95 or FFP2 rated masks. We didn't buy surgical masks. We bought latex gloves and not nitrile gloves. We tried to stay away from brand-specific products. We tried to stay away from imported products. We supported locally manufactured products. And we agreed that we would buy masks and gloves for staff only, and then sanitizer for the staff and public at all our offices and ports of entry. Chairperson, we have received some parliamentary questions on the procurement of PPEs for COVID. We appreciate the parliamentary oversight in this regard. I'm just flagging it for interest's sake. It's on the 15th of May. It was question 812 on the unit prices. On the 22nd of May, it was for tenders awarded. The 12th of June, for the procurement of PPE goods and services below 500,000 and deviations from the standard SEM processes. The last one was on the 11th of August, an oral question on the budget set. And we're Chairperson, Minister, am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible. Proceed.
I see a message, Chair, that it says bad network quality, so I apologize for that. But if I may proceed, Chair. Chair, so thank you, Chair. This slide just gives an indication of the allocation of budgets per province and the expenditure. This is at the 31st of July, so we still have sufficient budget left. But should our budget not be adequate, we will reprioritize funds because we need to do this from baseline. Chairperson, the next slide just gives an indication of what we bought. So this is according to our BAS report.
You just want to get reports because you understand that at the level where we serve, all of us as members of our council, it's not you'd heard even one of our council meeting with the president.
Eddie, can you
discussing petty things like this in our council or even in CCT.
Eddie?
So I thought it's a matter that we just need to resolve on our own, and then we'll just be able to submit. There are issues that we need to deal with, especially at the stage we have confronted with a lot of things we have not done well because of this COVID. In terms of building up structures and machinery for election. So for us to have an item in your council where
I think it's Mr. Chwaku.
Offices. It's an administration issue. It's a real issue of our council. It's an administration issue. So we just deal with administration. Where are we? What is
I removed him from the meeting.
Yes, proceed, CFO.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, this slide just gives an indication as to what we have bought thus far. This is as at the end of 31st of July. The consumables is medical supplies, those are the masks and gloves. Protective clothing is the same thing. Disposable paper, tissues and toilet papers. Toiletry, soap and washing detergents is the sanitizers, soap and that kind of thing. We have bought some batteries, Chair. We have we have procured some cleaning services, for deep cleaning in particular. We have the cleaning services is also sometimes we use the wrong allocations, Chair, the pest control fumigation. So we call it fumigation instead of deep cleaning. And then there was also some security services there, Chairperson. Chairperson, if I'll go to the next slide. So we now get to the crux of the matter, as I understand it, Chair. Chairperson, we used petty cash, especially in the beginning, for all procurement of PPEs below 2,000 rands per case. Chairperson, you know that we have 412 offices and 72 ports of entry. So in the beginning, in March in particular, we could not get, from a central point of view, we could not get all the PPE equipment and sanitizers and things to those offices. So we allowed for offices to use petty cash to procure whatever they could from the closest and store that had stock in place. Chair, I must point out that the controls on petty cash are very strict. If you don't bring a receipt back, then you pay for that without out of your own pocket. Chair, we also use requests for quotations. We use the Treasury transversal contracts, those RT contracts, we use them. We used the Central Supplier Database Emergency Procurement as per the instruction note number 8 of 2019-2020. Chairperson, so that paragraph says if you can't buy from the service providers on the list provided by Treasury at that point, and it was a list of 34 suppliers, then you can buy from anybody else on quotations, provided that the specifications are as determined by the National Department of Health, that the supplier is on the Central Supplier Database, and that the prices are equal or lower to the prices as on that RT contracts. So we used this CSD emergency procurement. We used that frequently in the beginning until that practice note was changed by another one, and I'll come back to that just now. Chair, we did not issue any COVID-related bids and tenders. Those bids, a bid process usually takes at least 3 to 4 months, so we have not issued any bids. And we also have not used what is called a Treasury Regulation 16.64 deviation. We did not use any of those, Chair. So we applied all the instruction notes as provided by National Treasury. Chair, and I'll come back to that. Chair, so the President asked us to, or requested ministers to provide all information relating to the procurement during the COVID-19 pandemic on the 5th of August. We submitted our list of all orders placed with suppliers for COVID-19 to the Presidency as well as to the Portfolio Committee on the 7th of August. Chair, that list, it's a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet Minister spoke of. It contains a list, it's the list of 441 transactions. If you look at that spreadsheet, Chair, you'll see that half of those transactions are petty cash transactions, but in value, it constitutes about 1% of all the transactions. So the number of, it's 218 petty cash transactions, and the value of the petty cash transactions is 200,410 rands 56 cents. The total amount of orders issued is 20 million rands, Chair. And Chair, I just want to point out that the total amount of orders issued exceeds the amount actually spent as at 31st of July. And this difference is because some deliveries, invoices, and payments for orders issued are still outstanding. Chair, then I said I would get back to the Treasury instruction notes applied. Treasury instruction note number 8 of 2019-20 was issued on the 19th of March. That's the one we used initially. Number 3 of 20 of 21 introduced what was called the Central Implementing Agent, the Imperial Health Services concept, Chair. We didn't succeed in placing any orders in terms of that instruction note. That instruction note was then repealed by instruction note number 5 of 2020-21, issued on the 28th of April. And that set maximum prices for identified PPE items and cloth masks. It was amended twice, Chair, so we have followed those amendments. The latest one, Chair, is Instruction Note number 7 of 2021, issued on the 26th of May, and it covers preventative measures in response to the COVID pandemic that resulted in the national state of disaster. It also deals with issues such as the holding of opening of bids, public openings of bids, and giving people more time to submit, Chair. So, Chair, those are the instruction notes we applied. As I say, we have applied number 8 of 1920 in the beginning, and then we applied 5 of 20 and 7 of 20 of 21. Those are the ones we applied. We did not apply number 3. Chairperson, this is the end of the presentation. I thank you.
Thank you very much. You can quickly take the other presentation, Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. The other is not a presentation, Chairperson, but rather a report that we forwarded or sent to Honorable Chairperson, that we sent to the Portfolio Committee. It gives a report on the progress made with the decisions of the Portfolio Committee. And I will go through these issues, Chairperson, and give a progress on those particular issues that the Portfolio Committee raised that the department should deal with. The first is the issue, Chairperson, is the appointment of the Deputy Director General Information Services, or our IT unit. This post of DDG Information Services was advertised on the 30th of August 2019 with a closing date of September 2019, and the selection process was scheduled to unfold during March 2020. But it was overtaken by the national lockdown, which came to effect on the 27th of March 2020. The shortlisting was subsequently undertaken on the 2nd of July 2020, and interviews were held on the 10th of July 2020. Regrettably, no suitable candidates were found, and the process of re-advertising is in motion. Chairperson, with regard to a plan to respond to ID queries by members of the Portfolio Committee, letters will be written to all Portfolio Committee members explaining the submitting process of all queries relating to civic services per constituency, and all these civic related queries will be coordinated through our intergovernmental relations unit, who will disseminate to the identified query project coordinator. We believe that this route and this process, Chairperson, that we will outline to Portfolio Committee members will assist in dealing timeously with queries from the Portfolio Committee members. Chairperson, the next issue is the list of mobile trucks per province and their capacity. The department, Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson, has a total of 100 mobile units. Out of this figure, 4 mobile units are at head office, and they are used for special projects or to strengthen the capacity in provinces where required. 96 of the units are deployed to provinces as follows. We have deployed 14 to the Eastern Cape, 9 to Free State, 8 to Gauteng, 13 to KwaZulu-Natal, 12 to Limpopo Province, 10 to Mpumalanga, 10 to Northern Cape, 9 to Northwest Province, and 11 to the Western Cape. These mobile units can be used for taking smart ID cards and passport applications, perform both birth and death registration. However, Honorable Chair, the department is struggling to maintain a consistent 100% functionality due to the following challenges, which are system related. The first challenge is that we have weak connectivity on our mobiles when deployed to deep rural areas or farming communities, unlike in urban areas where they work relatively well. The mitigating step that we've put in place in trying to remedy this, Chairperson, is that these trucks are using the MTN networks, which is not available everywhere. To solve this problem, we are looking at the possibility of equipping these trucks to pick up any available strong signal in the area, be it MTN, Vodacom, Cell C, or Telkom. With regard to system downtimes, which is another challenge, Chairperson, CETA has now developed a plan to redesign a Connect networks which had shortcomings both from infrastructure and transmission link. And we believe that this plan by CETA would be able to resolve our system downtime problems that we have in the department. That's not only affecting our mobile units, but our offices as well. Chairperson, the next issue is the report on the Lindela Repatriation Center investigation and the deadline of November 2020 when the contract with the current service provider expires. Chairperson, you will recall this relates to the investigation relates to the escape of detainees that were held at the Lindela Repatriation Center on the 2nd of May 2020. The 9 security guards who were suspended by Enviromonks were charged with aiding and abetting subsequent to the escapes on the 2nd of May 2020. The police later withdrew the charges, stating that there is not sufficient evidence for them to be charged on the charges of aiding and abetting. However, the company dismissed the 9 security guards after an internal disciplinary process found that they were responsible for the escapes that took place on that particular day. In relation, Honorable Chairperson, to the deadline of the 10th of November of the current contract of the service provider Enviromonks, the tender for a facility management company was advertised on the 10th of July 2020 with a closing date of the 21st of August 2020. The evaluation period is targeted for completion by the 30th of September 2020 to allow for a transitional period from the 1st to the 31st of October 2020 before the assumption of the contract by the successful bidder. Chairperson, the other issue is the report on the extension of the VFS contract. Subsequent to the submission of the department to the Portfolio Committee and the advice received from the committee, the department has met with VFS Global during June 2020 to inform them of the department's intention to extend the contract and to discuss the way forward. VFS is currently consulting with their top management and board as part of their governance structure to review the terms and conditions of the contract. The contract provides the department with the right to extend the contract for a successive renewal period of 36 months. Both parties, that is Home Affairs and VFS, will further consult with their respective legal departments to work on the addendum to the contract. The addendum will set the conditions for the extension. DHA will meet with VFS during the month of August for updates on consultations. And since the contract expires on the 31st of December 2020, it is expected that the current process to extend the contract will be concluded on or before the 30th of September 2020, which is in compliance with the contract conditions between the two parties. Chairperson, with regard to the plans on the Cape Town refugees, Honorable Chairperson will recall this matter deals with the refugees that were in the church, that took up residence in the church in the square in Cape Town, in the city of Cape Town. The cases for the refugee protesters who were based at Green Market Square in Cape Town is still being processed by the Refugee Appeals Authority. Those that need an appeal outcome are awaiting a hearing opportunity, which we were unable to conduct due to lockdown regulations and the closure of the Refugee Reception Center. Prior to the outbreak...
Sorry, if I could just shortly interrupt. Sorry, this is Alan Sam, the Content Advisor. I want to quickly just put your presentation up so that members can see what you're speaking to, your document. I'm going to just put it up just so you know. Sorry to interrupt.
Adams,
we have page 5,
the
document.
Adams.
Yes, sir.
Adam, is this your meeting or my meeting?
Beg your pardon, sir. I just want to put the Can I put the presentation up?
How do you disrupt my meeting?
Beg your pardon, Chair.
I don't like your attitude of disrupting my meeting. And it should not happen again.
Yes, sir.
Did you proceed?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Prior to the outbreak of the coronavirus, it was agreed between the City of Cape Town and the Premier's office that the reintegration process would start immediately after the verification was concluded. Resources to reintegrate were offered by the City of Cape Town, but none of the refugee protesters came forward to take up the offer. The risk of the loss of life and the uncontrolled spread of the coronavirus resulted in the establishment of a temporary shelter by the City of Cape Town in collaboration with the Department of Public Works in Bellville and Wingfield. These centers were established to provide shelter to destitute South Africans and refugees living on the streets of Cape Town, as well as the refugees illegally occupying the Methodist Church. These centers were intended to serve as processing centers for reintegration once the corona lockdown risk levels were lifted. We are cognizant of the fact that this portfolio committee ruled that integration is the only viable solution, failing which deportation will have to be considered. However, this process could not happen intra-lockdown. Chairperson, the other matter refers to the progress on the asylum seeker processing facilities that the department had to set up along the, or in the provinces abutting our borders, our northern borders, and in particular, a center that would have been set up in Mpumalanga. The feasibility study for this was finalized, Honorable Chairperson, and submitted to National Treasury for approval as part of the PPP process that we embarked on to build these facilities. It then emerged that the department does not have funds in its baseline to fund the construction of such a facility. And Chairperson, we had thought that at the time that we would receive money from Treasury for this, but as Honorable Chair knows, with the current financial position of the country, and also the advent of COVID, Chairperson, that and the monies that we needed to return to Treasury, we were not able to find this money in the baseline for the construction of this facility, and this matter has been placed in abeyance until we have the money to fund this project. Chairperson, the other issue is the roadmap of the Border Management Authority and the process for the appointment of the commissioners of this Border Management Authority. The BMA roadmap is in place, which will guide the rollout of the BMA over the short, medium, and long term. This 15-year roadmap is being implemented in an incremental manner over 6 phases. The immediate focus in 2021 and 21-22 will be on the first 3 phases that will address, phase 1 will address the completing tasks from the pre-establishment phase. Phase 2 will deal with undertaking tasks linked to the planning and establishment phase. And phase 3 will deal with the commencing implementation of the phase dealing with the initial rollout of the Border Management Authority. Each of these phases, Honorable Chair, have specific identified tasks. Within the context of the limited funding made available to the BMA over the current 2020 MTEF of 109.5 million, these priorities and tasks will be flexibly executed. The objective over the current term of government, that is for the MTSF period 2020 to 2024, is to roll out the Border Management Authority to 18 ports of entry and 5 segments of the land border enforcement area. Honorable Chairperson, with regard to the appointment of the commissioners, the BMA Act needs to be brought into operation to enable the appointment of a commissioner for the BMA. In this regard, a BMA commencement proclamation has been signed by our minister for submission to the presidency. The earmarked date for the operationalization of the BMA Act is the 15th of September 2020, but this date, of course, is contingent on the signature of the president to proclaim the commencement of the BMA. The department is currently undertaking HR-related matters pertaining to the appointment of a commissioner for the BMA. Tasks in this regard include, inter alia, the finalization of job profiles and grades, and once all recruitment prerequisites have been finalized, the relevant documentation will be submitted to the Minister of Home Affairs and the President for consideration. Chairperson, on the issue of the constitutional judgment, our Minister will speak to that particular issue and progress on it. Chairperson, on the department's employment percentage on youth and people living with disability at head office and per province. Chairperson, as at the 31st of July 2020, the department's employment percentage on youth was 16%. That is 1,393 out of 8,704 employees. The breakdown per head office and provinces has been attached to this report as Annexure A. Chair, as at the 31st of July 2020, the department's employment percentage on people with disability was 1.8% out of a norm of 2%. That is 157 out of 8,704 employees. The breakdown, Chairperson, has also been attached in this as an annexure in this report. With regard to the number of women employed at senior management level at HQ and per province, Chairperson, as at the 31st of July 2020, the department's employment number and percentage of women at senior management level was 59 female, which is 46%, and 69 males, which is 54%. The breakdown per head office has also been attached. Chairperson, we can confirm here that the department is committed, Chairperson, to employ more females, youth, as well as people with disability in the department so that we can reach or exceed the norms that have been set, and that we will make sure that that happens in the current round of recruitments that are taking place in the department. Chairperson, the other issue that was raised was the number of officers. Under the public works, owned by public works. The department currently occupies 212 state-owned properties. There is also an Annexure D, Chairperson, that gives a list of all of these properties. The other task, Chairperson, was to give to the Portfolio Committee the number of offices which the department is renting, the period of rental, and the owners of these properties. The department currently rents 230 privately owned properties, and the schedule, Honorable Chairperson, that gives the officers, the period of rental, and the owners of the properties is also attached as Annexure D. The other issue, Chair, was the commitments to support SMMEs, in particular women and youth, and progress in this regard. Chairperson, the report on the support of EMEs and QEMEs in respect of bids issued is also enclosed as an annexure in this report. Chair, the other issue is the progress and implementation of all the recommendations of the Auditor General as per the action plan that we have presented to the Portfolio Committee. Chairperson, the updated audit action plan is enclosed with this report. Our internal audit is validating the actions taken, and the report from internal audit will be submitted once the validation process is completed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DG. I've just got a notice now that this update was not circulated to members. I want Eddie to take this opportunity now to circulate this to members, and it will also be a subject of discussion in the next meeting, because members did not get to mess, but members did not have a chance to interact with the document report and the other one. So I want to allow members to speak in the following order. Number 1, Honorable Makluva. Number 2, Honorable Ross. Number 3, Honorable Lekhwaze. Number 4, Honorable Tito. Number 5, Honorable Muela. Number 5, Honorable Chaban. And then from there, the Deputy Minister, Mr. Nzunza, Shaza, then the Minister. Then we close the meeting. Honorable Makluva.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I want to start firstly in saying that...
Can you remove this presentation so that I can see Makluva? Yes, thank you.
Isn't my voice enough, Chairperson?
That's correct. That's correct.
Chairperson, yeah, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for the presentation. And perhaps also, Chair, I also echo your sentiment in the presentation that has not been circulated. And I think we should not in future deal with such presentations, because it disadvantages us as public reps to have informed decisions and also to have a valid discussion on the said documents. I want also to discuss and speak on the issue or on the tenders and equipment on the PPEs. Chair, it is a problem. And to quote the Minister of Finance directly, he has stated that the trust is broken and also that thieves has assembled in front of his door. Now, there are two things in terms of our approach. I also appreciate Minister Motsoaledi's input in terms of the decision taking these issues to the ministerial committee. But my problem is, and maybe the minister must respond to this, I find it difficult that we will now have a parallel structure. And maybe we as a committee should also discuss how we as a committee is going to deal with it in terms of from our side. Because, of note is there is sound discrepancies when it comes to all of these tenders. You'll find it with head office that there's a tender whereby sanitizer, the very same day, 130 and 136, there's a difference of prices within that tender. So in terms of the increase of quantities, the arguments have been made that the quotation is as it is because the quotation was less. But I would like to know from the department where there was discrepancies, because there was discrepancies throughout all provinces. How did they deal with their discrepancies? Why was there discrepancies? And what is the department endeavor to do in future to deal with those discrepancies? And then I want to speak to the decleaning as well. If it's possible for us to get a list, when was decleaning been done, where it has been done, and also perhaps what the amount of that decleaning was in that specific issue. We do have a number of discrepancies in various provinces where there was changes in all of these prices for say. So I think as a committee, we need to have a sound approach on how we are going to deal with the issue as far as the discrepancies is concerned. I also understand the issue of having cash on hand, utilizing these monies cash, but when it comes to companies, you'll have a company that charges 450 rand for a box, and later on it becomes 692 rand. So these are the things that we have to interrogate. And one would also think that in terms of all of these corruption when it comes to these investigations, why is it not whether that the department consider action itself instead of having the minister taking it to the ministry? And I also want to know whether any of these cases that has been sent, whether any of these cases has been reported to the special investigation unit. And there's also supplies in the Northern Cape where a box of 50 masks has been sold for 1,050 rand, and it's sold again for 65 rand. So we need to address this, and we need to call in actually these companies for investigation. But what is also for me important is a complete investigation on the profile of such companies to prevent the debate in and around family, friends, and so forth. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Ross.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for the presentations. Just to add on to what Honourable Maglua was saying, in terms of the cleaning services, I would just like to understand that there are a few items on the spreadsheet that we received that talk about 3-month cleaning service. What are those services? Are they to disinfect in case there's an incident of COVID, or is that preemptive cleaning? Because I see it's a 3-month contract of cleaning services. So I'd just like to understand what exactly those services entail. And then on the presentation of the 28th of April, we were told that 1 million rand was going to be assigned to each port of entry for PPEs. I don't see those PPEs on the report. So if I can just get an understanding of what happened with that budget for the ports of entry, was it spent and how much was spent? Where is that information? I was also looking for Centurion, for example, because I went there was an issue with it being closed allegedly by unions, and then I was informed that they were doing a deep cleaning, but I don't see the deep cleaning on this report at all. So my question is really, it doesn't seem like there was any deep cleaning done in Gauteng, even though I was led to believe that there were a few cases of that. So if I can just get some clarity on that as well. Thank you.
Honorable Lekhwase.
Thank you, Chairperson. I only have 2 questions. The first question is, have all procurements related to PPEs been done according to the National Treasury instructions? And if not, what measures have been implemented to correct this anomaly? My second question will be that, have the department ensured that awarding of tenders of procurement of PPEs take into consideration the issue of women, youth, and disability? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Tito.
Chairperson, thank you for the
No, you are not audible.
Chair?
You are not audible. Your system is behaving the same old way.
Yes, Chairperson, I have a problem from my side. That is why I'm not even putting in the video, because when I put it
No,
in,
it's worse.
it's going to dig me out.
No, it's worse. I think just convert it into writing so that because even the minister is indicating to me that he can't hear anything. So let's go to the next one. Honorable Mwel.
Okay. Thank you.
Honorable DM.
Chairperson.
Yes, DP.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think most of the questions have been covered by honorable members, especially on issues of prices on PEs and so on. I think I'm covered, Chairperson. I'll wait for further responses, and maybe we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chabane.
Chair, I want to appreciate the report, Chair, and also accept the omission that it was not circulated to our members. Just also to follow up on the issue of the border posts, whether this pandemic, what are the programs that were put in place in relation to the precautionary measures, and whether they were challenges relating to such. I know in Beit Bridge, at some point there was a serious crisis of the this COVID. The officials had contacted, and there was no mechanism, and that matter was since raised to the acting director general. I'm not so sure what were the response to that. The last one, Chair, is on the report. I think it's not bringing up the request also that we have requested to the Deputy Minister around the scenarios given of the issue of the ID. You know that the Minister And in 2019 budget speech, there were two citizens who had challenges to the idea, respectively 14 and 20 years, and in 48 hours and 22 hours, those issues were resolved. So we requested two scenarios why it has taken time to resolve, but why it has taken shorter time when the minister has responded. The deputy minister also has resolved the matter of a lady in Vuane, which has taken 20 years or so. 15 years, and it was resolved in 2 years. In 2 weeks. And there was a matter in Northwest, which was raised by Honorable Kwasi. So we did request that they must give us this scenario so that we're able to assess the work of the department, how they resolve this repositioning program, whether it's working, and what were the limitations for members to not able to resolve issues. There may be other issues, Chair. So we thought this report may have elevated that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like we're running out of time. This report, now that it is not circulated, it must be properly circulated. Issues raised from this report, we may have to elevate it into the next meeting. Honorable Deputy Minister, Richard.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I will just take a few issues. The first one is the last one that was raised by Honorable Chabane, and that we had our triple M just a week ago, and then we noted those cases that there are special cases that are coming from constituency offices that needs to be dealt with, with the agents that they deserve because they are legacy cases. What we have done is that the civics has now instructed all provinces to go to all constituency offices in the country to collect those legacy cases that leaders in various wards and in various constituency offices will be having, and then we will deal with them in that particular format. And we are also revisiting our own internal logs in various branches to gather all those cases and then deal with them in that particular way with the agency that they deserve because they need intervention. Some of them, you find that they become legacy cases because they had been left for quite some time not being attended to, and indeed we are attending to them. On the overall issue, I think on the overall issue of procurement, our approach was to get things done within treasury regulations and treasury instructions, and that sort of allowed us to be able to do things in the right way, and that is why we're able to present the spreadsheet that we've presented. I think Home Affairs is one of the first departments that was able to come to the portfolio committee and say this is how procurement is actually happening. So we're continuing in that particular way, and we're doing it within treasury instructions and treasury regulations. And I must say that the fact that we have been able to give the spreadsheet means that we are already passing the first test, which is public scrutiny, where the public can be able to go and check what has been happening with regards to procurement and all those related issues. On the issue of deep cleaning, well, deep cleaning has been very important for us as a department because when there is a case in a branch, it means we have to shut down the branch, take people for quarantine immediately, and make sure that they sort of observe the necessary days where they are not at work. But in the process, we then have a responsibility to make sure that we deep clean and sanitize those particular offices so that by the time people come back, they can actually come back in sanitized offices. Those are the few questions I would like just to deal with. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honorable Minister, we have we're left with only 3 minutes.
Yeah, Chairperson, I don't know how to deal with the 3 minutes. I was going to talk maybe in 1 minute, but I thought the questions raised by Honorable Rose, the technical ones, need to be answered by the CFO, if you allow, Chairperson. Because he asked about...
No, what we are going to do, because it was not circulated, we will have to elevate it to the next meeting. So, but because now that you know those questions, you can send the answers in writing, but just give your overall responses.
Okay. No, thank you, Chairperson. That's in order. No, Chairperson, the issues raised by Honorable McClure, we don't find any contradiction about what he called parallel structures. Every form of investigation to satisfy the public is necessary. If the portfolio committee feels like the spreadsheet you have given them, when you go through it, you flag something that is suspicious, you raise it and demand and find the mechanism to investigate and get an answer for it. The ministerial team is going to be doing the same. They are not investigators. They are looking at the spreadsheets which all government departments give them. If they flag something, they refer to the investigative agencies or they demand an answer from government. So the more the better. The SIU, the Ministers' Committee, the Portfolio Committee, then the public will be satisfied that all corners have been covered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Like I've said, we will have to elevate so that members, we don't take members by surprise in terms of presentation. We will elevate some of these issues to the next meeting. And thank you, members, for participating in the meeting. And thank you for continuing to hold the department into account on the issues that we are required to do as members of parliament. And would like to thank you also, Minister and the Deputy Minister, for always availing yourselves to the Portfolio Committee. As the committee, we don't take your ever availability very light. We really appreciate that you're always here to interact with the members. And we have just started the third term. And take note that the House is sitting this afternoon. We'll meet in the House. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Desmond, we are requested to circulate the mask. Honorable Mwela, you are requested to circulate the mask to all members.
I will do that. Circulate it, Honorable Chair. I will circulate it to all honorable members.
Please do so, including a shield.
My Clover.
Yeah, please do so with the shield.
How are you, my brother?
I'm cool.
I miss you. I miss you.
Hey, guys.
Sure.